So I want to move the program right along, so I'm not going to go into a long discussion. I'm going to hand off to my colleague, Greg Niemeyer, who's not only the director of the Center for New Media, but also faculty in art practice. Greg.
Thank you very much. I think I'm good with the microphone. So thanks for coming to this cool conference, and it's been a really fabulous day so far. In water polo, they say only half the action is visible because all the other action is underwater, right? And in a conference, only a tenth of the action is visible because it's all happening on stage, it seems, but 9/10 of the action really is in the audience and in the social spaces, in the breaks, and so forth. So it's a fabulous experience, and I'm glad you're here. I wanted to briefly point out that Ken Goldberg made a project called Robot in the Garden about, I think, 20 years ago, maybe. Is that about right? And that project asked the fundamental question about delegation of authority and civic behavior within a shared common space mediated by a robot. And that project brought up such an important question that still today we're grappling with it. So it's an iconic project, and every now and then in our lives we get to do one thing that makes a huge difference. And this is one of those things that just remains active and remains relevant to this day. And so all the questions that came up at that time still come up today. In our afternoon panel here, I'm excited to introduce three speakers that are going to look at the question of ethics in robotics. How do we justify delegating our authority to a robot, to a machine? And how do we justify the robot carrying out our wishes? And how can we stop the robot from continuing to carry out our wishes if our wishes are no longer fulfilled by that machine? How can we do that with a machine that doesn't have, as we do, a moral compass, that doesn't have an ability to judge yet? And how can we take that risk? We take that risk without really knowing what's going on in the name of progress, and we learn as we go. So maybe we do all the learning. And it's a huge risk. Well, I have three panelists today who look at this risk and jump in head first into this question from multiple different points of view. So Eric Stackpole is the author of OPENROV, which is an underwater robot that explores the underwater world with a lot of grace. And so it's a thing that you can download and you can buy online, and you can build yourself, and then you can throw it in the water, and then it goes and swims around and explores the places we can't go to easily in a beautiful way. And so he's going to be our first speaker, and he has a number of videos he's going to show about how this thing works. Did you bring one along, Eric, as well? Is there one? Yeah, there is one here. Good. So we get. No. You knew there wasn't enough water here, huh? Yeah. All right. So just to give you a little bit of a taste, so he's really a practitioner of robotics, and he really pushes robotics because he now makes robotics something that you can buy for what is like $800, your device, right? And I can build it myself and see what happens with it. And so he democratizes access to the machine itself. So this is no longer an MIT project that costs $1 million a year and is under government DARPA secrecy, but it's actually now open and accessible. So there's a huge advantage there, but still, do we know how to call back the spell that we released with this thing? We don't know. So the next panelist I'd like to introduce is, I'm going in the right order here, is our Stuart Geiger, who is a brilliant grad student for this one reason alone, that he realized that his graduate funds would carry him further if he lived in Bangkok. And so he went to Bangkok to write his dissertation and is now back here with us. And he's joining us, and he's filling in for Jordan, who is still recovering from a broken foot in San Diego. Stuart Geiger writes about, he writes code, he writes algorithms. He also thinks about the algorithms, and he also questions the algorithms and how much we rely on them. So there's a very specific project he's looking at, bespoke code. And it's an agent that he'll explain a lot more about than I could do. But this is his paper that he just got published on January 6th. So that is his point of view to ask about the limits of algorithms and how we give them agency and how well they fare in terms of administering justice in the space of Wikipedia in this case. But in general, how well they fare in terms of administering justice on their own, if they're biased or not. Is there such a thing as a neutral algorithm? And then the final panelist will be Deirdre Mulligan, who's a a professor here and runs a huge project at the law school. And I'm just going to quote directly from her beautiful web statement. And she works on this project and global network initiative to advance and preserve freedom of expression and privacy through collaborative efforts aimed to resist government efforts that seek to enlist companies in acts of censorship and surveillance. Now, you need to have a lot of skill to resist in that space. This is not a non-trivial activity. This is a very complex space. And to illustrate the complexity of what she's doing, here are a few recent publications that she achieved together with Ken Baumberger and many others. Privacy decision-making in administrative agencies. How do administrative agencies take on the burden of deciding what a citizen's privacy is and how does it get worked out legally, technically? Now, I'd like to say in general, the law is a wonderful algorithm. The law is a beautiful algorithm that actually describes what we're supposed to do and what we're not supposed to do. But we don't let it run autonomously because we realize that it's not a closed system. And that's why we have lawyers and judges and cases, and we try to figure out every time, well, is the law applied right here, or is it wrong, or do we need to adjust something? And really, this is a panel about questions, and to me, the biggest thing we need to commit to is to keep asking the question of, are we doing it right? Are we doing it right? And so often we don't ask that question. And to illustrate my point, I have one more slide here. This is a slide. This is a slide of Eric's robot going into water, and he's making it rule because he's driving it, right? And then it's governed by code, but then there's the manta ray here that has to resist.